So here's a great question for you. I've never had candy corn in all my life. I'm attracted to the sweets. I'm sure I would like it. Has anybody never tried candy corn? Do people love it? Do people hate it? Leave me a comment. I'd love to know. Maybe I'm missing something. Welcome back to the Crochet Corrados with my friends at yarnspirations.com. I'm your host, Mikey. Today is the Candy Corn Throw. I'm going to tell you a little bit of a backstory, but if you don't want to hear any kind of stories, just go to the video description and then you'll see chapters and then you can skip ahead. So I'm going to tell a little backstory with this one here and then we're going to get ourselves started. This is really deceptive and that's why I did not want to film it, and I'll share you my backstory next. I'm going to leave you a piece of advice. I'm an assembly line crocheter, so if I was to do this whole blanket, I would do all of the yellow pieces first. So there's 72 of them. I would do just the yellow, 72 of those. I put them in a little mini box, shoe box or whatever. And then once I'm ready and have all of those done, I would then pull them out of the box and then do the next one and then put those into another box and then do all the orange next. And then finally, I would do all the white last. And it just, for me, the way that they make cars, it's not one person that makes a car, it's like several people down an assembly line. It's faster that way, you don't have to remember as much, and therefore you can see more progress. And so by the time you finish the white on your very last one, all of your motifs will then all be completed. So that's just something that I would leave with you for advice. So one of my pet peeves that I have is that when a double crochet shows in and then there's spacing, sometimes it really bothers me, and on this particular design, it really did bother me. I was thinking for many years that when you're looking at this, that you're looking at graph GAN work, which I really don't have a lot of interest in. And so I did not want to put myself through the mental battle of doing this as a graph GAN. So I just kind of put it on the back burner. Every time I saw it, it's like, yeah. So I got a request from one of our YouTubers and they said they want to have this filmed. And I'm like, oh no. So I reached out to Yarn Inspirations and I asked them for the metric data on this, whether people are downloading it or not. And sure enough, they are. So I decided, okay, I'm going to take a look at this more seriously. So I looked at it and said, okay, how do I get rid of the stuff I don't like? So I don't like that there's spacing in between the stitching. So what I did is that I changed the hook from 6.5 millimeter, a size K, down to a J, which is 6 millimeter. So just that little bit of adjustment. And I also changed the yarn to Caron 1 Pound instead of Red Heart Super Saver. And the reason why I did that is that I know that 1 pound is actually more thicker in the strands. And so I would be able to eliminate the look that would bother me. Once I got moving on this thing, I was surprised on how fast this was. I expected that when I was going to go working through this thing, it's going to take me forever. And it's only 9 rows to get there, but there's not a lot of excessive counting. So I was watching Amazing Race Canada and I was kind of blasting my way through making the samples here so that I could teach you. And I thought, well, these are actually kind of fun. And it was over before I realized it was over in order to do the samples here. And I realized that this pattern has been very deceptive to me because the fact is that I expected it was a lot more harder and I wasn't sure that there was that much interest. So without further ado, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to talk about this pattern in more detail. And I'm also going to show you the information. We're going to be talking about the joining. I'll show you that too as well as the final border. And there's also a diagram on the second page. So let me refresh and let's get ready for the next clip. So looking at this pattern in more detail, you'll notice on page number 2 that there's a schematic of this. So you'll notice that the side edges are like this, they're not flat. Sometimes that bothers people and other times it isn't. So what you're looking at is one upside down motif and then one turned up the other way, and it works its way across. And it's actually a pretty easy pattern to be able to maintain. This means that if you don't like the sizing of this, you can just remove how many motifs that you want, because the outside border that we'll do, it won't matter because it'll always match. So that's a good thing. So I'm going to now start, and we're going to get ourselves ready for one of the motifs, and you can change the colors anytime you want, and I will follow the pattern as written. So let's get started, and we're going to use the color yellow. And that's the starting color. In this case, this is Caron 1 Pound Sunflower. And I need to chain a total of 21. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, go all the way to 21. Maybe back here in a moment. Row number 1, we're gonna go 4th chain from the hook. So count back, so 1, 2, 3, go to the 4th, go to the back hump of the chain, that's what I'm recommending, and just double crochet yourself all the way back across. And so double crochet in each chain all the way back, and I'll see you at the end of the row in a moment. Once you're coming all the way across, I'm going to leave a little tip for you. If you're a crocheter that you cannot identify what side is the right side on row number 1, now is your time to be able to help yourself. Get a spare piece of yarn or a stitch marker and just go through a piece of the stitch work here on the front side only. Don't go all the way through, and just grab onto it and pull through, and then just loop around. And what this will mean is that this will be the right side. So when we go to do the edging, it's going to say right side facing up. If you do this, you'll know what side's facing up because it's missing on the other side. So that's my tip. Let's go to row number 2. You should know that all the colors are consisting of 3 rows. So once there's 3 rows of yellow, we then move to the orange and then to the off-white. So hook back in, and it doesn't say that this is what it causes, but through experience, I know what it causes. So you're going to chain 2. You're going to double crochet into the next one. Now, for those that are familiar with crochet, normally you would chain 3 and then double crochet the next, but because you're chaining 2, it causes it to look like a 2 together stitch, which is what we want. So just know that. You're then going to double crochet yourself all the way across the row, except for the final 2 stitches. Where you're going to screw up the most will be at the end of this row on row number 2, because the stitch work is not so obvious. And I will show you that in a second. So we're just working our way across. Where you're going to screw up, which I actually screwed up on my last motif of all of them, is that I was missing a stitch and I couldn't figure out why. The turning chain here is part of the stitch. So what you would like to do is that we want to put this stitch and the last turning chain together as a 2 together. So wrap the yarn in going in, pull through 2 and hold. Then go into the turning chain. Don't go into a space because that will open it up. So right into the turning chain, wrap it in, pull through 2, and then pull through all 3 loops. And you just made a 2 together right at the very end. So one of the screw ups that I did is that I forgot about this piece, and it looked like it blended really well, and therefore I was missing a stitch, and I didn't realize until I got to the very top. So we want to turn our work and begin row 3. In row number 3, you're going to chain up 2 and double crochet in the next, which is considered a 2 together right at the very start of your row. And then you're going to blast your way across with double crochet, and you'll put the last 2 together, and I'll see you there in a moment. So this would be the final row for this color, and the last 2 have to come together as a 2 together. So this here is considered 1 stitch, and this is another. Okay, so don't think it's 3 stitches left, it's only 2, and you're going to put the last 2 together. Okay, so right in the top of the one that appears as 2 together, and do that. So it's doing that. So what I want you to do, I would strongly recommend, you have to do 72 of these motifs. I would strongly recommend that you use a tapestry needle immediately and just start hiding in your tail ends as you go, because it'll make your life a lot easier. So to do that, you just want to grab a tapestry needle. If you try to weave it in with your hook, it's definitely going to fall out. And the trick when you weave in, just don't go between the strands, but actually separate the strand plies itself. So intentionally just kind of like pull apart some strands in between, but do not interfere with the top row. So don't appear to go over. So then you are going to then just kind of hide it in. And you want to go back and forth 3 times. It just takes a few seconds. And because if you leave and do this at the end with 72 of these, you're going to have yourself a bird and a couple cows and possibly give birth to kittens. And you'll hold me responsible. So then that's what we're going to be doing today. So, okay, so let's get ready for the 4th row, and we're going to move up to the color of pumpkin. Okay, so remember where you finished, and just make sure that you turn your work and get ready. Let's start the next row. So we want to start at the top of the 2 together. Just join it, and you're going to loop over and join, and then chain 2, and then double crochet immediately into the next one. And I'm going to leave my tail out, and I'll deal with those ends later. I've already shown you how to weave those in. So the first 2 is now considered a 2 together, and so you're going to blast your way across. And just think about it, every time you're blasting your way across, you're eliminating 2 stitches. So this gets faster and faster to make these little motifs because there's less and less stitches. Once you get closer to the other side, you're looking for the 2 last stitches. Can you identify them? This is considered together, and that one. So these are the two last stitches. See how it looks like there's three? There's only two. So put those together, turn your work, and let's start row number 5. In row number 5, chain 2, go right immediately to the next one. So there's your first 2 together, and then just blast your way across again. And the last 2 are going to be coming together, so just look. These are your last 2. And that completes off that row. So we have one more row to do in this color. Remember, every color has 3 rows, so you start the next row. Row number 6, chain 2, double crochet in the next. There's your first 2 together, and then double crochet yourself across. Finally, on the other side, the last 2 stitches there, and this will be the end of this color. And so we want to eliminate it after we do our 2 together at the end, and we're going to get ready for our off-white, which will be the final color. So I just wove in the end with my tapestry needle. This is where I finished, so I want to turn and get ready for my last 3 rows. Okay, last 3 rows. This will be 7, 8, and 9. So join it to the top of the first 2 together. Chain 2 and double crochet into the next stitch. And then, of course, blast your way across. Some people don't like when I use words like that, but it's YouTube, it's tutorial format. I'm talking to you as if you're my friend. Okay, so once we get over to the other side, it's really quick. The last 2 become together. And this is row number 7. Turn your work. Let's do number 8. Number 8, chain 2, double crochet into the next one right here. And then keep double crocheting over until you see the last 2. And put those 2 together. Turn your work and let's do the last row. Okay, your last row, you're going to chain 2, double crochet into the next, and then you have just one that you can only do before you have to do the last 2 together. So that leaves you a total count of 3 stitches at the end at the top, in case you're paying attention to that. Okay, so you got the 2 together, the 1 and the 2 together, and this is where the journey ends. So what I'm going to recommend to you is that just trim off your yarns and just get them all woven in, and then I'm going to cover doing the edging, and we'll do that next. And because your stitch marker is showing you the right side, that's going to be helpful for when you do that, so don't pull that out yet. Let's begin to do our edging. The right side has to be facing up, so if you want to leave that in after you do the edging so that you'll know what sides are facing up when you do the joining, that might be a good idea. So let's begin, and we're going to create a slip knot and put it onto the hook. We also want to turn this upside down this way and concentrate on this corner right here. We're going to do our corners. They're always 3 single crochets. We single crochet across. I'm going to show you how to go down the side edges and then back around. When you go into the top of this one, you want to go into the chain work, never to an open space. The chain work will help it stabilize and not make it look so open when you go to do it. Once you're in, yarn over, pull through 2 like that, and that's a standing single crochet. It just looks nicer. In the same stitch that you were just in, place in 2 more single crochets. Take your time, it is not a race. In the same stitch, you want to apply 2 more single crochets. Just take your time and just get them in. Once you got your 3 in there, you're ready to move on. So you're just going to come onto the underside of these, just right here, and apply 1 single crochet in each. And it's not until you get to the very end one where you're going to put the 3 single crochets in. Noticing that I'm burying that tail end a little bit further, and then once I think it's enough, which I think it's enough now, I'm going to put it in behind and continue to single crochet myself until I get to the next corner, which I'll pick you up there in a moment. Once you get to the other side, you can see it here. Just go in, and the very last one is going to have 3 single crochets to do the turn. Now this is a really easy edge. This is one thing that really shocked me. So each one of these rows has 2 single crochets at the end of it. The trick to doing something like this is never go into a space, but go into the chain work. So each row has 2. So you got 1, and then just go into a slightly different spot, but on the same row is 2. Then the next one here is 1, and a slightly different spot, 2. And just keep making sure that it looks right. So you got another one here. So you got 1, and then 2. So you're going to do that all the way until you get to the top. So please make sure you put 2 single crochets at the end of each row. So I'm coming up to the last row here. I found the last row is a little bit tricky. Just make sure I get them in. And there's the last 2 on the side of that row. So on the first top of the 2 together, you're going to put in 3 single crochets so that you can turn. So 1, 2, 3. And you know that you have 1 double crochet that's by itself, so there has to be 1 there. And then at the top of this 2 together, there has to be 3 single crochets so that you can turn. And then you're going to treat this side like it was this side here, and every row has 2 single crochets at the end. And again, make sure that you go into the chain work, never to an open space, and therefore it'll look good. And I'll be right back in a moment at the end of this round. At the end of the round, you still have the 2 in the final row, and you've already done the corner when you started. So you're just going to slip stitch to the top of the first single crochet, and therefore this motif is considered done. So you already know how to weave in your ends at this point, so weave in your ends, and then I'm going to show you how to do the joining. And again, leave your stitch marker in if you can't identify which is the right side at this point, and therefore when you join it, it'll be already set to go. So back to the pattern we go. We're going to look at the schematic, and it may be just easier to work your way in rows as you go across, but sometimes it might be easier for longer stunts as well to do that. Okay, so that's something that you'll have to decide for yourself. So when I'm going to look at it here is that I need to join it in a way that makes sense. Okay, so if you look at this diagram here, I got the upper 1 and 2 are done, and so I can see this. So therefore this one here with the right side facing up, because this is the right side, is going to be joining into the spot. When I like to join on the back loops only. It makes for a nicer edge versus grabbing both loops on both sides, because both loops on both sides can pucker. So this looks a lot better to my point of view. So even though it's not looking like it's gonna fill in, once you start sewing this thing in, it's gonna stretch to what it needs to stretch to. The stitch counts are the same. So you're gonna grab the same strand of color that the join is, and on the one side, create a slip knot on the other side, and then put a tapestry needle in the other. So I like joining on the back loop, so I'm going to join on the middle one of the grouping of 3, and I'm going to go only into the back loop of this one. Okay, and then the middle one of this one here. And you can always do things in case you don't do it right. You can always like improvise if you have to, and then go through that loop that I made, and that will lock that as a permanent lock. That's my own preference that I like to do. And what I want to do is that using the next stitch that's available on this side, go over top of the straggler to capture it in, and then come into this side here, the back loop here. Okay. And then you're going to come into the next one here, and the next one here. And what you're doing is you're matching stitch to stitch, but I would not necessarily trust yourself 100%. What I would think about doing And once you get this in enough, just slide it in behind. You can use a tapestry needle to hide it. But what I would do is just kind of make sure that everything's lining up properly. If you're off by one stitch, there's no harm in going into a stitch you've already done and advancing one on the other one in order to bring it back into alignment if that's required for you. Again, you can improvise. And with the sewing, with the same color like it is, it's really easy to hide stuff like that in. So I want you to go all the way across until we get to the top, and I'll see you there in a moment. So for sewing on crochet, it bothers some people. I don't know why. Well, I do know why. It's a pain for some people, but for me, the hard work has already been done. Like slamming in through some whip stitching, honestly, is not a big deal, at least for my brain. But, you know, some people like to do all the work and then they go on social media and then they ram it into their social media that they're hating that they have to sew. It's like, oh my God, cry me a river. So I really like this because the hard work is behind me. And now as I attach things, the whole project starts to become together. And I think it's just a remarkable thing. First world problem. So I'm coming close to the top of this and I want to kind of make sure that I'm being tight with my stitches. And when I come to join the top of the middle one here, this is the middle one here, I'm going to join it in. And I like to join diagonally to the one diagonal if there's one there and really pull it in. And then I go back across and then I come across. So I do that so that you don't end up with an intentional hole. And then you only have a few stitches left at the top of these because it's the short end, and you're only going to go until you get to the middle one. Now, if you have more triangles to add, then you can just keep on moving down without having to end your yarn and just keep on moving along. So I'm looking for the middle one, which I think is the next one. And once you're ready and finished, just give it a good stretch. Looks good. And I'm going to turn it to the back side and I'm going to finish the yarn. So I like to tie it into a knot on the back side. And then I like to just weave in the ends back and forth on the back only. Do not let that needle hit the front side of the work or I'm going to come through that screen and knock a few lights out. If you happen to be in the way, oops. You don't need to go through the project. Keep it on the back because this is the way it should be done. And so therefore you'll always have a good side to look at. And once you have it woven in, and then your first strand, you can also do the same thing. Just weave it back and forth 3 times, and then you're good to go. So as we begin the final border, you're going to notice that there's the hard corners. Those are absolutely a definite turn. And these are just going up and down in the motion. When it sinks down in here, we're going to do a single or double crochet 2 together to make it so that we're not going to add too many stitches there to create a ruffle. And then the other ones, we just kind of follow it around because it'll naturally do it. So it's only the corners that you really have to worry about making sure you add those extra stitches in order to turn, but don't get confused. When we do this, what we want to do is we only have to do 1 round. So if you have to improvise, it's not a big deal because your next round there is no next round. So you're just going to go up and down in the motion in order to do it. So if you think it looks wrong, it's ruffling, just take out a stitch, or if it's buckling and it's pulling too tight, just add some stitches, and overall, this is your final round, so you can get away with pretty much anything. Let's say this is the hard corner, and then I'm going to show you how to go over top of one of these, and then I'll show you how to sink in when there's a sunk in. So let's go into a hard corner of the middle one of the 3 single crochets. And I need you just to attach, chain 3, and then 2 more double crochets in that same spot. And that will allow you to have that nice turn that you need. So you're simply just going to work your way across 1 double crochet in each of the pieces. Make sure the right side is facing up. I haven't said that, but make sure that it's true. And what I need to do is when I become part of a joining section right here, there's just going to be something that you just need to be aware of, and I'll see you there in a moment. So as I'm making my way across, where there's a join, like so, there's always just going to be 1 double crochet in the join itself. So you just fill in all the stitch work until you get there. Now, sometimes when you join things together, there's an indentation that happens. Let me just finish this. And the indentation happens when you sew. Do you see how it's kind of going in here? What you can do, it's not in the pattern, but you can just make that as a treble crochet to come on down and just grab the connection spot or where you did the sewing. And that makes that stitch slightly taller so that when you jump to the other side, it doesn't cause the edge to have an imperfection. So that's something that you can decide for yourself. So I see you on the next hard corner in just a moment. So I'm coming around, so I'll show you the indentation in just a bit, but I'm not there yet. So on the very corner one, the one that has the 3 single crochets in it, the middle one has 3 double crochets, and then you just carry along this edge, and this here is a flat edge. So just make sure that you do put in your 1 double crochet in the connection spot as well to make sure that it will be looking good. So I'm gonna have you turn once you get there all the way, and then I'm gonna show you how to handle the indentation. So as you get closer, and that's all, folks. As you're coming around, you're gonna have an indentation. So you're gonna have to do a 2 together double crochet with that. And if you don't, what happens is that it will buckle because you're gonna add too many stitches there. So you're gonna get very close to the indentation. And so I'm gonna do it now. So this piece right here and this piece I'm going to do as a 2 together double crochet. And you already know how to do that at this point. And what you're doing is you're making sure that there's a stitch missing so that it will look like it's gonna turn. Okay, and then you start working your way up the other side. Show it, so it should stay flat. So it's just there, and let's take a look down, and there you go. So continue around and finish your border. So I'm coming to near the end of the journey, and hopefully this video was a help for you. Push that like button if you don't mind, and leave me a comment on your success. I'd love to hear. You're going to join it to the top of the first chain 3, and then you're just gonna weave in your ends as you normally know them. Okay, so when you pull through, favor the back side for weaving in your ends, so just turn it around and do the back side back and forth a total of 3 times as I showed you before. And actually, you know what, if you added just two more like this, you'd almost have like a little centerpiece for maybe handing out Halloween candy at your front door. Kind of neat idea. So this is the Candy Corn Throw by YarnSpirations.com, designed by Marianne Forresto.